Excuse me, sir, this isn't the song I chose. Sir, this is Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I'm not going to sing this song. Son of a bitch! Come up!
Good morning, sweet world, and welcome to the No Dunks podcast on the Athletic Network. It's Tuesday, November 10th, 2020. I'm J.E. Skeets, and today we got the homie Tass Mellis, we got the bearded one, Trey Kirby, the man making the magic happen, JD, and a special guest. He's back for a second time. It's the Athletic's very own NBA insider, John Hollinger. John, appreciate you joining us here this morning.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We're going to get into your mock draft up on the Athletic, but my first question, I want to know, what time did you end up cracking that celebratory beer on Saturday, and what beer did you go with, John?
So it was slightly before noon, so which I don't typically do, and it was a nice double IPA.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, it went down smooth. It was a warm day on Saturday, but it wasn't too heavy. So it was nice. It was
good.
Yeah.
Look, NBA draft, sounds weird to say this out loud, but it's just over a week away, which means teams are starting to lock in their draft boards in preparation for what's going to maybe be a wild night. We're going to talk about it. So the mocks are coming fast and furious. I'm trying to keep up here. We got ESPN dropping them. You got the Ringer, and now yours, John. It's up on the Athletic. I encourage everybody, all of our listeners, to go read it, and I know they will. You wrote that you made your calls and you read the interwebs and you searched for other tea leaves to help you construct this thing. What might happen on November 18th? You've got your top three of LaMelo to the Wolves, James Wiseman to the Warriors, and Anthony Edwards to Charlotte. How confident are you feeling with your mock this year now that it's published? And I guess the follow-up is, how difficult was it to write this one considering, this insane offseason in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah, this was a hard year to do it. I mean, we've done this. We did this internally with the Grizzlies, and there were a couple years that we had almost the entire top 20, pretty chalky on draft night.
Wow.
And this wasn't the case at all this year. So I would say a lower degree of confidence, as I look at it. I do think Ball, Wiseman, Edwards is probably your top three. I mean, I think Tyrese Halliburton is maybe the one guy who has a chance to sneak in there. But then there's a lot of trade action. This is unusual because you have teams at the top looking to trade out or trade down, which is atypical. And so there's a lot of variables there that can affect what happens afterward. And then there's not a clear consensus really. From about 4 to 11, it's kind of this soup of the same guys that teams have roughly even on draft boards, and it's more personal preference on a lot of these guys. So it is a pretty difficult draft to forecast, and that's definitely the vibe I got talking to other people too, that they felt unsure, that they didn't really know how this was going to play out. So I think it's going to be one of those drafts like the one we had. I mean, obviously everyone brings up the Anthony Bennett draft is the main example in 2013. But we had a draft a few years later where I think it was 17, where after Thon Maker went with the 10th pick, it was just nuts after that. Everything was just out of left field. So we could definitely have one of those nights again.
Is it hilarious when, because you spent 7 seasons there as the Grizzlies vice president of basketball operations, take us inside the war room or whatever you guys call it. Is it pretty funny? There are years, like you said, where you're like, okay, we figured that, sort of chalk. But then, there are these insane years where you're like, what is going on? Or people throwing papers in the air and freaking out?
Well, it's funny because so what we're doing is a little bit like what everyone else is doing. Because if you think about it, you're usually only picking once out of 30, and there's 5 minutes between every pick. So you're making your calls about potential trades and whatnot, but there's only so many of those you're going to be making on draft night.
Right.
You've made a ton of calls leading up to draft night, but then on the actual draft night itself, the volume actually goes down because you sort of know what can be done or not. So you're basically just calling teams back and being like, okay, this thing we talked about, we're in or we're out. And so it's like 10 dudes sitting there watching the draft on TV basically for a lot of the night. No, it's really what it is, especially in the first round. And so like, yeah, there's a lot, like when Anthony Bennett got picked, there's just like all of us around the table going like, whoa, and,
who would be the pick at number 1 this year that would be the Anthony Bennett that would kind of blow everybody's mind?
Probably Halliburton, I would say.
Yeah.
Like the Wolves took Halliburton number 1. That would definitely blow everyone's mind.
Sure. Do you think this is, a top 3 type of draft? Like it's just a 3-player guy, and then like you said, the rest of them are all maybe good potential role players. Who knows? You might have a star within that mix from 4 onward. But like, are you locked in? And I know trades come into play here, or whoever's drafting. But like, is it Melo, Wiseman, and Edwards in some order in that top 3?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, you think so?
And you can debate whether it's a 3-player draft or a 0-player draft.
Ooh.
That some people have argued to me, because the top of this draft, I think, is not as strong as the last couple.
Yeah.
Zion Williamson or John Morant definitely would be the number 1 pick in this draft. I think there are probably 5 players from the 2018 draft who would be the number 1 pick in this draft. So probably not as strong at the top is the perception around the league.
At what point did LaMelo Ball sneak into the number 1 spot for you? Because you've been tracking this for several months, just doing your due diligence. But to me, as an outsider, it seems like LaMelo Ball was in that 3, 4, 5, 6 category. Like he wasn't even in that definite top 3. He hasn't played basketball in a long time, but somehow he got into that number 1 spot. When did that happen?
Probably a gradual evolution. I think coming into the season, the perception was that Edwards and Wiseman were the top 2, and neither of them really blew anybody away. So I think that created the opening for LaMelo Ball to leapfrog them. And then his season in Australia, even though it had warts, he showed so much raw talent in what he did that made it easier for evaluators to vault him ahead of Edwards and Wiseman.
Oh, it's a crazy dichotomy you got here. 3-player draft or a 0-player draft. It is bonkers because we talked to Liam Santamaria, an NBL broadcaster in Australia, about LaMelo Ball, and he can go either way. He was going either way. He saw him up close and personal. He could go Magic Johnson / Jason Kidd comparisons, blew us away. Who the heck knows? Really,
Lonzo Ball comparison.
Yeah, LiAngelo.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I struggle. I mean, again, we are not draft experts. Reason why we got you on here today, and why we're talking to someone the next couple of weeks. I watched a lot of LaMelo, of course, because he's the intriguing name, and the family and all that. And you see the passes, and you are like, wow, that's pretty special to have a feel for the game like that. But there are so many times where I'm just like, I don't see it. I don't get it. I'm like a number 1 pick. And then especially considering the team, like, now are the Wolves going to take a guy like that when you have D'Angelo Russell too? And you made it clear, these weren't like your personal rankings, like your ratings. These were who you expect the teams to draft, right? Not what you would do, not what John Hollinger would do if he was in the front office, but what you expect they to do. But like, let's talk about, Ball. Like, if you were with them in the Wolves front office, like, are you like, I guess we go with him because the potential is there? Are you concerned about, we hear all these things about, well, he's not knocking his interviews out of the park too. Like, well, what would you do? What would you say? What would be your input?
Well, so here's the thing. Like, these other guys all have warts too, right?
Right.
Like Anthony Edwards scares the crap out of people. Okay. Because of the warts he showed as a player, kind of the indifference on defense, and the jumper's still shaky, and does he really have good feel for the game or not? So I think there's things about him that scare people. You're not going to draft Wiseman and play him with Towns. So especially the way the game is going. So I don't really see that one happening. And at the end of the day, I think you're asking yourself, is D'Angelo Russell like so awesome that you're going to maybe pass on a high level talent just because their positions overlap somewhat?
Right.
Probably not.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I do think Ball and Russell can play together if at least one of them tries on defense.
Wow, hasn't that been the case for the Timberwolves the past 5 years? They can play defense if they decide to try. I don't know if bringing in LaMelo helps, but somebody in the stream team is saying, would there be any hesitancy from the Wolves to look at Anthony Edwards, considering what they just went through with Andrew Wiggins? Are they similar sort of players where they could?
I compare Edwards to Wiggins all the time. So for me, it would be hilarious if Edwards ended up there. But probably not as much for Wolves fans. I don't know. But it's an interesting comparison because just his motor doesn't run that hot. And it's the same kind of thing where you can see the talent, but sometimes you're just like, dude, like, come on. So I think that's really interesting after what they went through with him. I would say, you could still probably pick him, but maybe don't give him a max extension after 4 years if he's not panning out.
Right. What if he promises to get better?
That changes everything. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the mechanics of everything and the timeline here that we have this sort of truncated period, and there aren't great fits for the Wolves at number one. Do you think this is sort of going to be like the presidential election where it feels like the drama's on draft day, but really what matters are the few days after and the weeks after where we could see more trades just because of how short things have, I
actually think you're going to see a lot of trading the day before and day of draft to set people up for free agency. So I actually think that's where you could see a lot of trade action happen, and the draft may be sort of secondary to that. In other words, like, the 37th pick got traded, but it was just like a throw in as part of this bigger trade where, two big contracts were exchanged. So I definitely think, even though it's kind of being to set up the next step, I do think draft night trades are going to be a thing.
Saw the Ringer ask this question. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to throw it at you, John. Sure. Does it make sense in this draft to take a bigger gamble because there's so much uncertainty across all of these guys as we're going through, especially, at the top of the leaderboard here, at the top of the big board? Do you think there's some truth to that? It's like, why not? I mean, it's like, we're not convinced about any of these guys. So
if the upside is there, sure. I mean, that's my argument for Pokuševski, the mystery meat who's playing in Greece right now against dudes like you and me. But
he's built like Skeets, actually.
Yeah. I got a little weight on that
guy. And so, but my argument, like I forget where I had him. I had him like 13th on my board. And my basic argument was, at this point, why not? Like he's clearly got some upside. It might be a horrific failure, but there's just not a lot left on the board at that point. Why not take the risk? And I think it was like, it was the Bucks logic when they made the Giannis pick, right? In late lottery, and when Utah took Rudy Gobert much later in that draft. So I think there's a case to be made for that. Now you still have to weigh the risk versus the reward, right? There needs to be some like high level upside payoff to doing this. So, don't just take some random guy from Piedmont Community College because, hey, why not, right?
Hey, I saw him hit 3 shots in a row once.
Yeah, exactly. He looked pretty good over in the park the other day.
Yeah, on that front, do you ever just try and sneak a guy's name into the 27th spot? Just some random name in there? Because will anyone really notice especially if you're going down the board?
Oh, like a made up European name?
Yeah, exactly.
Like slip it into the mock draft just to get people like, what? Wait a minute.
If anything,
teams calling their scouts, what do we know about this guy?
Yeah, just to test the athletic editors too, see if they're awake at the wheel there. Just like, who is that guy? Let's talk trades, because this does make this draft really confusing as we're talking about here. Because you say like some of these top teams, the Wolves, the Warriors, they may want to move down. They may want to get out of there. Which teams below them, obviously, do you think might be most likely to try and trade up? Is there one that makes sense, be it a Pistons or a Celtics doing a package? Like, what do you think, John?
The problem is finding teams that are genuinely excited to move up. Okay. So I think the Knicks would like to move up and get LaMelo Ball if they can. Okay. There's been some talk about the Pistons doing that, although they seem pretty locked in on Patrick Williams. Chicago at 4 is a little interesting to me, that they could maybe do a deal to move up to 2 or 1 and get LaMelo Ball. But I just don't know at the end of the day if that's really in their organizational DNA to take a swing like that. Charlotte going from 3 to 1 to take Wiseman is probably the one that I think is a little more likely. Again, Charlotte's been pretty conservative though, as far as taking swings like that. So I would still say maybe it's more like 40-60.
Okay.
Let's call it that something like that happens. But I do think like if they want Wiseman, I think Golden State probably takes him at 2. So if they want to get him, they probably need to leapfrog.
Oh, interesting. So like something similar to what we saw back in the day with the Celtics and the Sixers.
Yeah, it would be exactly that kind of deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And because they're in love with him. Yeah.
Except hopefully it would turn out better for Charlotte.
Yeah, sure. You would hope so. And that's not a guarantee by any means. You said the Warriors, you think if they're there at 2, they don't trade out, that they go with Wiseman. What's your thinking with that?
It just makes the most sense for their short term and their long term. I think he still has a lot of trade value because a lot of people are intrigued by his size and his movement and whatever. And then in the short term, obviously, he gives them a legitimate center, which they don't really exactly have that right now. I mean, Draymond's undersized and Marquise Chris isn't like, I think he's more of a 4 than a 5. So Kevon Looney's injured all the time. I mean, they don't really have that guy at the 5 right now. So I could definitely see them going in that direction.
A lot of the talk with Wiseman and the Warriors has been that if he's ready to just be a rim runner and a dunker and a shot blocker and a rebounder, he would be a perfect fit for them. How hard is that to convince a guy who's going to be the number 2 pick in the draft at 19, 20 years old to fall into being a role player when he's likely been a star for the entirety of his life?
Yeah, he's not going to get the ball many other ways. So he sort of has to. I mean, it's actually easier with a big than it is with a guard because it's like if it's the only way you're going to get the ball, then that's kind of what you're going to do. I do question whether he can rebound at a high level. I mean, he's never really shown that part of his game, even though he has the size and the ability to get up and down the court. So that'll be interesting to see at what level he actually can operate as a rebounder. He can certainly be a rim runner for him. He does tend to like to fade away from the basket and shoot jump shots, and it's a little frustrating at times. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see develop wherever he ends up.
Yeah, it's so strange with these top 3 guys. Everything I read and hearing you, like, no one seems excited about any of them, really.
Exactly. Well, exactly. Because, yeah, that's why these teams at the top are talking about trading down, and that's why the teams they talked about trading down are like, yeah, we'll get back to you on that.
Right.
Nobody's like super excited about moving up, with the exception of maybe Boston, who is more from a perspective of like, we got these 3 picks, we don't have any roster spots, we'd like to upgrade them if we can. So it's I think because of that, like, there's going to be a lot of conversations. I just question how many of these picks will actually get traded at the end of the day because there's so many more sellers than buyers.
Right. You, I'm sure, are looking at other mock drafts, again, other publications, other companies and stuff like that. You're seeing like sort of where you are falling in line with. Is there a surprise when you're reading these other ones that that is totally, you're like, what compared to yours? Like, what was the big one where you're like, I just don't see it in this kid, or they have him so high going to this team that you're like, I don't get it, or sort of vice versa where you're like, they're sleeping on this kid?
Maybe Orlando a little bit. Like,
okay.
I think Orlando has always drafted length over skill in the past. But I think they've gone so far in that direction the last 3-4 drafts that they literally don't have room for another guy like that. Like, people talk about Jaden McDaniels with Orlando, but if you look at if you already have Chuma Okeke from last year, if you already signed out Farouk Aminu, if you already have Aaron Gordon, if you already drafted, there's one other guy,
Jonathan Isaac, I guess.
Jonathan Isaac, yeah. Thank you. There's just no room for another guy like that.
Right.
And they're desperate for shooting and offensive skill. So, I mean, to me, if Aaron Nesmith or Sadiq Bey is there when they pick, they got to go in that direction, even though it goes against their type a little bit.
Andrew Nicholson could be there. I don't even know. The roster is so deep. There's just so many.
You got to throw in for the Canadian.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to be there.
You wrote, when talking about the Blazers in your mock draft, John, quote, I've heard some wild stuff here. I mean, like wild stuff, but I'm not sure how much of it to believe. Give us the scoop. Give us the
I just
wildest
had
thing you
multiple
heard.
people tell me like the Blazers are looking at people that you would never expect to go with the 16th pick, and and that could completely rock the apple cart for the rest of the draft.
Okay, so it's not the idea of maybe of like, oh, the Blazers are going to package Zach Collins and their pick, and they're moving up to 1 or 2. It's more like they're taking somebody that you're not ready about.
From Piedmont Community College might actually be
wow.
pick.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's where Leigh is right now. He's doing an interview.
Yeah,
they're looking for some
like,
shooting.
sorry, man. The only time they could do it was during our recording. We need shooting on the wing.
Oh my God, I want the wild stuff to mean the Blazers draft Leigh Ellisette, whatever it is they got that pick there. That would be incredible. Yeah, this is going to be such a fascinating draft. It's like, are you almost excited that you're not involved with the team in this one, John? Because it is so weird.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I tell you, from the front office perspective, the draft is a lot more fun than free agency. The draft it's almost a little like Christmas, right? You know you're getting a present, right? You know you're getting something, and there's like on the actual day of the draft, there's actually like I was talking about, there's actually like kind of a lot of downtown where you're just like shooting spitballs at the TV and watching the draft with everybody else. It's fun. Whereas free agency is completely nerve-wracking, and I don't miss that at all. So I would say draft night in a war room is actually great fun.
Except, I remember the Christmas, I thought I was getting a great toy, and I got boots. I remember it to this day. I got boots. That was my big Christmas gift that year.
Well, being in Atlanta means you'll never get boots for Christmas.
That's right. That's why I moved here. I didn't want boots. So let me spin that into a question. Who's the boots of this draft?
Oh, man.
Yeah, like, who are you? I guess you do sound pretty low on Anthony Edwards. You're not all that enamored.
So I actually put Edwards second on my board because I just think the upside is there. I actually am not crazy about Wiseman just because the league is just going so far away from his player type.
Sure.
And there's just enough questions about watching him. When I watched him play, he played a couple games for Memphis, and like he's not a dominating rebounder. Like he can be kind of soft at times. I can see where people see the upside with him. I like physically and in some of how he plays, he reminds me a lot of Hassan Whiteside, which is still like a good player, but I don't know. So I have a
number 2 type.
Yeah. So I have a hard time getting really, riled up about him. And then I would say like further down, Jaden McDaniels, like you watch him at Washington this year, like he wasn't good. He just wasn't. And I think some people see his body and kind of project out and think, I think he still could have a lot of potential and turn into a player. And I just question how much is really there to work with.
Interesting. Which one are you most confident about with your big board here? Like where the team and the player, it just makes the most sense in, like, if you're a bet man, you're like, I'm putting money on it.
There's so much talk about Patrick Williams being Detroit's pick at 7.
Yeah. So talk me through that. I mean, I'm an idiot with this stuff. Like, why him? What's he bring to the table? Why are the Pistons in love with him?
So he was a forward who played for Florida State this year. He actually came off the bench. He was the youngest player in college basketball, I believe. Or if he wasn't the youngest player in college basketball, he was the youngest college prospect in this draft, definitely. So still a lot of room to grow. 6'8", plays either forward spot, pretty decent shooter, can put it on the floor a little, pretty good defensive metrics. I think there's some question about whether he can defend on the perimeter or not, but overall, like definitely a pretty alluring prospect, but also just kind of fits into the way Detroit is drafted and fits into the way Troy Weaver drafted when he was in Oklahoma City.
Right.
And just in having conversations with other people around the league, that was the one consistent thing that everyone's like, because Patrick Williams was kind of perceived as a guy who would maybe go in the early teens. Mm-hmm. And so the two things everyone said, one, Patrick Williams is moving up. And then two, like, oh yeah, I've heard Detroit and Patrick Williams. Oh yeah. And like that's like loud, clear drumbeat there.
Okay. All right. So if he is still there, I guess, what do they have? The 7th pick? Is that right?
They have the 7th pick.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty good chance he's there. I don't really see Atlanta taking him at 6. I suppose the Hawks could trade that pick, but again, there's more sellers than buyers. I just don't know what they're trading it for that really pushes them to do that. So I think at the end of the day, he probably is there at 7. And if so, I expect Detroit to take him.
Something that came up a couple of times in your mock draft is sort of the concept of GMs having a type. Like you're mentioning Troy Weaver when he was with the Thunder, they would always get defensive guys who maybe couldn't play as much on the offensive side of the ball. Same with the long guys for John Hammond, who's now with the Magic, used to be with the Bucks. Is that something that you're constantly aware of when you're in the draft room, of having a type and maybe other teams knowing you have a type and trying to play against that? Or is it something you lean into?
I'm not sure. I don't know if we were perceived as having a type. I think people were confused with us because, I came from the analytics background, and then Chris Wallace, who was there my last 5 years, came from a completely different background. So I think people didn't know what we were going to do because of that. So that was a little helpful, I guess. But I do think with some teams, you sort of know what their tendencies are, and that helps you maybe get a little bit of a read on what they might do. And I tried to bring that into my mock draft too. I mean, this is certainly the type of thinking we would do internally when we're trying to scheme out what might happen on draft night.
Makes sense. Another sort of type thing that I thought was funny was predicting Tyrese Halliburton to the Bulls. Yeah. Everybody who's a Bulls fan knows about the Iowa State to Chicago connection. It seemed to be over after the fake offseason we had here, but what do you know? The Bulls finally move up in the draft. They're not picking 7th anymore. They're picking 4th in a 3-player draft, and we're getting another Iowa State guy. Should I be excited?
You should. I really like Halliburton. I think he's good. He can shoot. He's a good passer, active defender, good in transition, can play off the ball, can play either guard spot. I think he's going to be a good – I don't think he's going to be like an all-star because I don't think he has quite enough shot creation ability to get to that level. But I think he's going to be a really good, positive starting player for a long time. So I'd be pretty excited if I was the Bulls.
Well, John, you're obviously a big basketball fan. I know you're a soccer fan, football. You love the beautiful game. Are you a Timbers fan? Is that right?
Portland Timbers, yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. How are they doing quickly?
They are the 3rd seed in the West heading into the playoffs here. So yeah, I don't know if they're going to be able to, they made the Cup final against Atlanta. I think it was 2 years ago.
Right.
But I don't know if they're going to be able to get back to there because they've had too many injuries now. But they won the MLS's back tournament, though.
Oh, okay.
And they're the only team that's ever won it.
Oh, there you go. Well, are you a golf fan? Also, John. No, you're not a golf fan. Well, that's unfortunate because I'm setting up for an ad read here. Because it's everyone's favorite tournament of the year except for John Hollinger. Because the golfers are in Augusta, Georgia to compete for the coveted jacket. DraftKings, leader in daily fantasy sports, is putting you in the center of the action by giving you a shot to land in the green. This week, DraftKings is giving you a shot at $1 million. Man, that's the top prize when you download and sign up using the promo code RUN, R-U-N. If you haven't tried DraftKings, this is the time. It's easy to play. You pick 6 golfers, you stay under the salary cap, and you submit your lineup before the tournament tees off this Thursday. Then you just sit back and you follow the action. The more red numbers they have on the leaderboard, the closer you'll be winning to some of that green. So rack up the points for pars and birdies and finishing position and more. Even though you may not be able to hit the course, DraftKings is giving you the chance to scratch your competitive itch and reign supreme. Download the DraftKings app now and use the code RUN during sign up. This week, DraftKings is putting you in the action with a free shot at $1 million top prize. That's code RUN, and you can get that free shot at $1 million top prize only at DraftKings. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. Not a golfer, John, at all.
Nah, I just never got into it. Putt-putt's all right.
Okay. You're not bad at it.
Yeah.
Actually, through the windmill.
Yeah, exactly. Get into the clown's mouth on 18 and free pizza. Yeah, I'm down for that.
I actually thought being in a front office, I don't know why, you'd have to take up golf because you'd have to get out there on the course and talk trades and whatever. But I guess not.
No, nobody has any time for golf.
during Rivers, that's all he does.
During draft season No, I mean, actually, it's the coaches and the personnel who travel with the team. They actually have a lot more time for golf because they're doing so much of what they do at night. So there's definitely the time, okay, squeeze this in between shoot around in the game or before shoot around or whatever. I don't know.
But not you.
They're on the road anyway, you know, like, all right, you know.
They're living it up.
We got an off day in Phoenix. Okay, let's play 18. But yeah, not on the front office side, not so much.
Well, let's go through some more names here in your draft, in your mock draft. We talked a lot about LaMelo and Edwards and Wiseman, and a lot of people have. Some other names, though. Maybe you can talk about strengths, weaknesses, even NBA comparisons if you want. Killian Hayes is a great name, first off. Just an awesome NBA name, Killian. I think there's another Killian, too, out there.
Killian Tilly from Gonzaga. Could work his way into the end of the first round, probably goes in the second. But he's interesting, too.
I've never heard the name Killian, and finally we're going to have two here suddenly in an NBA draft.
And they're both from France.
It's amazing. It must be a popular name there. So Killian Hayes, I mean, yeah, you said he's the higher one. What should people know about him, or what you like or dislike? And again, NBA comps, where you see him going, where you have him. Yeah,
so he's a French teenager who played in Germany this year. Very, very good on the ball, good handle, especially with his left hand. Really good footwork for getting to floaters and step backs and whatnot. Good size, probably like 6'4", 6'5". Pretty good defender. Not like athletically explosive though. And at this point, not a good long range shooter. He's a very good foul shooter, but has struggled from the 3-point line. So a lot of different opinions you hear on him. Some think he's way too left-hand dominant, that people take away his strong hand. It's really easy to defend him. Some people are worried that he's not an elite athlete and how he's going to, finish in the paint over length when he's playing against NBA athletes instead of Germany's like a decent league, but it's definitely a step up going to the NBA from there. And then other people compare him to, I've heard comparisons to Jamal Murray, like for the kind of the footwork he has to get into these off the dribble shots. Evokes some comparisons to him. He's also a really good passer. So he can be like that lead ball handler, even though he's maybe guarding the other teams too. There's a wide variety of opinions on him. He's definitely going to go in the lottery. I'm curious to see where exactly that is. You hear Phoenix at 10, you hear the Knicks at 8. You hear even Detroit at 7 if they don't do Patrick Williams. So interested to see where he ends up and interested to see what he looks like in an NBA game.
You mentioned Jamal Murray as a comparison, which I think is a little more fair because of the left-handed nature. He's obviously getting Harden and Ginobili comparisons as well. Those guys are Hall of Famers. You mentioned the left-hand dominant factor. How big of a deal is that for an NBA player? You had a left-hand dominant player down there in Memphis, Zach Randolph. He seemed to be okay getting to his left every single time he needed to.
Yeah, although, he wasn't playing point guard, so it was probably a little different. The comparison I always make is like John Stockton played 20 years and dribbled maybe 4 times with his left hand in that whole career. So like if you just have enough of a counter that they have to honor it, then you're probably going to be mostly okay. But it's definitely a concern among people who watched him and felt like he didn't deal great with ball pressure and opponents who overplayed his left. So, and again, at his age, it's not like you're talking about like, well, he's 25 and he is what he is. He has no right hand. Like he's young enough to develop that in his game too. So you have to think about that.
That's interesting. Like when you're drafting these guys, there are, I guess, a handful of them that are perfect and they have very little holes in their game. But for the most part, there is something like, could be a better defender. Could be a better shooter, could have a better handle, stuff like that. When you were with the Grizzlies, or even your opinion now, which skill set that might be lacking are you most confident you can build up in a guy? And then maybe the flip side of that is like, if they don't got that, then I don't know if they're ever going to have that. Is there, do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say strength, which you can build up in the weight room,
right,
and shooting ability, which is not perfectly solvable, but generally guys do get better in that area over the course of their careers. Now, I'm I'm not saying draft somebody who's a total brick mason and think he's going to turn into Reggie Miller, but you know, they generally progress, right?
Right.
So those are the ones that you worry about less. I mean, height, you're not fixing, right? Like that you're probably stuck with, unless you luck out and maybe the guy's 18 and grows another inch.
Like Giannis is still growing, isn't he? He's adding an inch every year.
Yeah, Giannis is still growing. I'm pretty sure Jaren grew a little after we drafted him in Memphis. Right. So you can get that a little bit. I would say ball handling ability is tough. Usually guys who don't really have that creative ability on the ball, sometimes they develop it, but it's kind of uncommon. And so that's a tougher one to bank on. And leaping ability, I think you're basically stuck with. Trainers will tell you that they can improve a guy's vertical. I struggle to come up with real life examples.
Right. You're skeptical with that.
Yeah.
Hey, okay. Then speaking of that,
John, I've been speaking with some Instagram guys. I used to only be able to get my first knuckle above the rim. Now I can get all the way to the second knuckle.
Yeah. Is that the Nerf rim or?
Yeah, I am lowering the hoop as well.
Yeah, we're talking about a 7-foot hoop here. He's lowering it down. He's not crazy. Because like this comes up with Ball a lot, these interviews, and Edwards, I guess, too. How much stock did you put into like when you talked to them? And I guess now they're doing the Zoom meetings and stuff. Like, some of the kids are maybe nervous. They're just not all that charismatic. Like, was that important to you guys?
So the way it always worked at the draft combine, it's a little different this year, but the combine it was almost like speed dating, and you'd have these 45-minute time blocks where they'd come into like every team would have a different hotel room on the same floor.
Right.
And the player would come in, sit down with you for 45 minutes, and then he'd just go on to the next room. So it's a contrived situation is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't lend itself well to really getting to know somebody. I mean, there are things you can do, but I've often thought that can do as much to mislead you as it can to lead you in the right direction. The thing that really has a lot of weight or should have a lot of weight is not the interview directly with the player, but all the conversations you have with the people around the player and doing your background research, right?
Right.
If you're visiting the school during the season and spending time around the program, if you're talking to all the people who had coached him or who had been with him in the past, if you talk to the agents who recruited him and didn't get him, right?
Yeah.
It can be a little dodgy. Some of them have some maybe venom, but but from that you get a picture, right? If you talk to 20 people and all 20 of them are like, this guy is bad news, like you don't need to do the interview in some ways, right? Like you already know. And conversely, right? Like when you get glowing reviews from everybody you talk to about a guy, you sort of know going into that interview that, maybe if he's, I don't know, maybe it was just like a little, awkward or whatever, or he's nervous or whatever. You're just like, okay, well, literally every person I know and trust said this kid is great. So we'll go with that.
Like Tyrese Halliburton at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, the guys who get the glowingest reviews probably, like on all the background reports, would be Halliburton, Desmond Bane from TCU, and Isaiah Stewart from Washington.
There you go. So those are like no-brainers. Like you're just going to be able to plug them in, and they're going to work hard. I guess that's the hope, right?
I mean, like I've gotten great background on guys and had great interviews with them, and the one fly in the ointment was that they weren't that good at basketball. So you have to sort of remember to keep this in perspective, right? Like it's a talent business at the end of the day.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, it does help. Malcolm Brogdon, awesome guy, also pretty good at basketball. It's you need to sort of have a little bit of that.
Went to the finest university in all the land.
Also smarter than everybody in the room. Will be the president one day. In fact, it's his nickname, and he's still like in his 20s. Yeah, that's a good sign too. I'm always fascinated by that because he keeps seeing these things with LaMelo that people are just like, he's aloof, I guess. He's not he's not charismatic. Whatever. And I think it was John Krasinski. I just tweeted it out actually. He was off of your mock draft, talking about what the Wolves were going to do as you had him taking LaMelo. And I thought he did have an interesting point of like, if this is your lead guy, if this is your point guard, I mean, you may want that position to be your vocal leader, right? Like the guy that is, in the ear of all the guys, everybody on the same page. And if he's not that, if he's a very quiet kid or he just doesn't have that in his DNA, then maybe that is a concern. And I personally think there's some truth to that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Just, who are you taking ahead of him that you're in love with?
Well, yeah, you keep coming back to that. You're like, LaMelo's not that great, Skeets, but everybody after him is not all that amazing either. So, yeah, we will see. A couple other names. Tass, I don't even know if we need to ask Hollinger because your in-laws know everything about the Israeli kid, Deni Avdija. But, John, what's your opinion on him? Because I've seen people have him very, very high, and he's sort of all over the board as well. What do you think?
I mean, I do think he'll go high. I wasn't as excited about him as some other people. I think his shooting is still a question. And then positionally, I still see him as more 4 than 3. I know he can do some stuff on the ball. He reminds me a lot of Dario Saric when I watched him in Europe. I think he's got a little more bounciness and quickness to him probably than Sarge did at the same age, but he's probably a worse shooter. And so I just question a little whether he's more like a role player at the end of the day. That said, there are some people I talk to that really like him and think he does have a lot of upside and think he can be like that big ball handling wing that everyone's looking for. So because of that, I mean, I think he's definitely going to go in like the top, say, 8 players. You hear Cleveland a lot with him. You hear Chicago at 4, although I think that's more speculation based on like Arturas Karnisovas in Denver. They've drafted a bunch of international guys. So everyone's like, well, Avdija's international. Like maybe they'll draft him.
Right.
But definitely a lot of talk about Avdija to Cleveland at 5. I have Obi Toppin going there in my mock, but it's like Toppin or Avdija in Cleveland is what everyone's hearing.
Yeah, Toppin, I think, is a local guy as well. He went to Dayton, right? He seems to be one of the guys that would be easily plugged in, but the concern with him is he's an old man at 22 years old.
22, yes.
Prime. He also has the Jerry Krause no neck approach, right? When I look at him, it looks like he's always shrugging, which I guess is good because you're not wasting your height.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Good spin.
Yeah, get those shoulders higher. Yeah. Deflect more passes.
How do you feel about Obi Toppin, though? Is he going to?
I think he's
going to be productive immediately.
I think he's an awesome offensive player. There are questions about him at the defensive end. I really like his outside shot. I think he's going to be able to pick and pop for threes right away. I think he can rim run and dunk. I think he can run the floor. I think he's a pretty good passer off the block. I think he can post up mismatches. There's a lot to like there offensively. Defensively, it's probably not great. I mean, he's undersized for the 5, doesn't move that well on the perimeter, but he can get up off the floor. And so what you saw him do sometimes was get beat off the drive, but then get back in the play to block the shot. I think he's going to be okay enough there that he'll be able to keep on the floor for his offense. The fit in Cleveland is a little wonky because they have Kevin Love, Larry Nance, Andre Drummond, and maybe Tristan Thompson too. We'll see if he comes back. So there's just a lot of bigs there already. I think if they traded one of them, it would probably be easier to open the floor for Toppin. And honestly, I mean, I think they would probably have to do the same thing with Avdija. I still think he's more 4 than 3 at the end of the day. So either way there, I wonder what's going to happen in that Cleveland front court if they draft either of those guys.
Do you have a favorite trade like in your mind that you'd like to see happen, I guess, either day before or on draft night?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that are really interesting to me.
Let's go through them. People love trade talk.
Like what about Wendell Carter in the 4th pick to Golden State for the 2nd pick? If you're the Bulls and LaMelo Ball is not the 1st pick, do you move up to 2, trade Carter? If you're Golden State, then you can move back to 4. You get a big in Carter, but then you can move back to 4 and take Halliburton or Avdija, one or the other. Golden State's been rumored to like both of them. So that's an interesting one to me.
Okay, hold on. Let's ask the Bulls fan, Trey Kirby. What do you think? You loving this idea?
I love it.
Oh, wow.
I'm a huge LaMelo Ball lever. But honestly, if you tell me a guy is 6'5" and he can pass, I'm 100% in. I'm like, this guy at the worst, he's the next Sean Livingston. And I don't think that there's necessarily a Bulls backcourt guy that couldn't be superseded by LaMelo. You know, Zach LaVine is the DeRozan of the Bulls. The best they're going to get from him is a trade piece somewhere down the line. I would be a little hesitant to give up Carter, but he seems like the kind of player who's going to be very good for a very good team. Maybe not necessarily a rebuilding team since he's such a team player.
Yeah, I mean, if whatever team he's on, if they allow him to actually shoot jump shots, I think that would probably help too this year. There's a lot of Golden State deals we can talk about. Yeah. There's another trade I really like, which is if Boston turned its 14th pick into Larry Nance. I think he'd really help them. I think he could play the 5 for them in playoff games. He's switchable. He can kind of sort of make threes. He's a pretty effective rim runner, just a good team defender, really good passer, knows how to play. Like, he just fits there to me. They'd have to cobble together some contracts to pull that together. It would help them a lot if Enes Kanter opted in before the draft, which we'll see if that happens or not, because they sort of need his contract to make something like that work. But anyway, that's the one that gets me excited.
Yeah, that's why I saw that one in your article. That's why I wanted to ask that question. That's interesting. So do you think the Celtics will ultimately do something here? Because they have all these first-round picks.
They're the team that I would bet most on doing something.
Right.
It may not have quite as many exclamation points as the things, that everyone gets excited talking about. Like, oh, they traded the 26th pick for 2 future seconds in cash. Like, like something like that,
That's what that gets Nate Duncan going in the morning or something like that. But maybe not the casual fan for sure.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. I think what they would like to do is package multiple picks into a single higher pick. I think second on their list would be packaging picks and bad players for a good player, or trading picks this year for future years. I just think it's, like I said, the demand for picks in this draft just isn't that high. Mm-hmm. Although I have been getting some vibes, like the picks they have at 26 and 30 in some ways might have more of a market because teams know they won't cost as much, and teams see it as a relatively flat draft talent wise. In other words, the guy you get at 10 might not be that different from the guy you get at 40. Right. So there could be some motivation for some of these teams that don't have a pick. For a team like the Clippers or Houston or somebody like that to try to jump in at those late spots. So maybe Boston will find a market there.
Speaking of that, the 30th pick, I know your love for Paul Reed out of DePaul. I'm surprised you didn't sneak him into your mock draft there.
Well, like I said, I was basing this off of what I'm hearing, and I just had no energy from anywhere that he was going to go in the top 30 picks. So yeah, I mean, I had him 12th on my board, I think. Like, I'm a big Paul Reed fan, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think he probably ends up going, I'll say 40 to 45.
It is absolutely incredible how flat the draft is talent-wise then. As you said, from when you get into double digits to almost the second round, you can sort of pick and choose where guys are going.
Yeah, I think if you go around the league, draft boards, there's going to be a lot of variance between draft boards this year. Whereas some other years, I think if you went around the league, the top 8 players would have been pretty chalky on teams' draft boards. Not the case this year.
So when that Orlando Magic player signed and the board was behind him, they got the photo of that board behind him. Usually in years past, the Magic would just be all big guys on that board. But now there'll be a huge range, and that would be incredible to be able to see everybody's draft board after the fact. Like, when it's all done, why aren't we getting that?
Did you guys have one, John, or was it all digital? Like, was it Google Doc or something? Like, or did you actually be writing on something?
It changed over time because my first couple of years we had an actual board with like players' names on magnets, and then the last few years we just had a digital, and we had a giant monitor in the draft room.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh man, I like
the magnets were more fun though.
Yeah, for
somebody
sure.
Is like, one of the staffers walks up there, takes the magnet off, and it's just there's more ceremonial.
100%
with the magnetic board. So we got to bring those back.
How is there a lot of truth to next year's draft looking pretty special. I keep seeing that. I don't know how locked in you are on 2021, but yeah,
that is the word on the street. Yeah. I have not seen one of these guys play in an actual basketball game, so it's hard for me to really be like, oh yeah, I agree,
right.
But hopefully college season is supposed to start November 25th if they can figure out a way to play games, which they are still seemingly working on. The ACC actually announced its schedule today, so that's exciting.
Oh, there you go.
But we'll get a better idea at that point. We'll see Cade Cunningham with Oklahoma State. We'll see some of these other players in NCAA games and just get a better idea of where the talent level at the top of this draft really stands.
Yeah, because I think I saw or heard someone saying like next year's draft, 6 or 7 guys would have been taken number 1 if they were in like this year's 2020 draft. So there might be some some incredible talent. They always say that, I feel like.
Yeah, a couple of these guys are going to be playing for a G League team too. So that's
right.
That's a little twist on it too. NBA got tired of having these guys go to Australia, I guess. So,
yes.
Stay here this time.
Yeah, I actually saw a clip of one of those guys playing. Will be on that G League team. Who's got hops like Trey Kirby, can definitely get those knuckles over the rim. This past week, he did a monstrous 360. Was it a Jaden Smith? Was it? I don't know. He had a monster, not a Jaden, not a Will
Jaden
Smith.
Smith.
Jaden Smith. Yeah,
music to hoops. This guy can do it all.
Yeah, I got
little triple threat.
I got a little Bow Wow on the brain as well. There's a lot happening here.
I wanted to ask you about one more guy, and I know I'll butcher his name, but I got to get some practice going on here. Onyeka Okongwu.
Oh, I was hoping the name was going to be Trey Jones after that.
No, I'll screw that one up as well. Don't worry. What do you know? I see him being linked to Charlotte a lot. Yeah, he's a great defensive player, I guess. I
like Onyeka Okongwu a lot. 6'9", maybe a little undersized for the 5, but long arms, really good rebounder, great hands. The ball, if he gets his hand on the ball, it just sticks.
Oh, wow.
Like halfway decent shooter, even though he didn't really play on the perimeter a whole lot at USC. Good post player, can score with either hand in the post. USC, if you watched USC, they didn't go to him on the block nearly enough, in my opinion. Good defensive player, good feet, can be switchable. Reminds me a lot of Bam Adebayo, actually, kind of the way he plays. And to me, I think he should go in the top 5, and I think he's probably not going to. I think Washington absolutely has their fingers crossed that he gets to them at 9 because they need a center and they need people who can play defense, and he checks both boxes. So I definitely could see a fit there. Charlotte at 3, maybe. Charlotte needs a center too, but they don't need to draft a center necessarily. There's a lot of free agents they could go after. They have cap room. So I could more see Charlotte, if it goes LaMelo and Wiseman 1, 2, it's easier for me to see Charlotte taking Edwards 3 than it is for me to see them taking Okongwu.
Okay.
I really like him, though. I think he's a really interesting player that's getting a little overlooked in this draft.
We're going to take a quick break in 1 second, our final break, and we got some more questions after that. But one more guy, because I just thought about it when I looked at your mock draft, that I was like, I didn't even know who that was. He felt like he came out of nowhere to me. Again, I'm a very casual college basketball fan, and I'm only following the mock drafts and what you guys know. But the Knicks pick, you had at number 8, them taking Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah.
From Kentucky. Yeah, talk to me about him. I honestly, I'd barely seen that name.
So Tyrese Maxey, for me, it's just a bet on the Kentucky connection with the Knicks.
Okay.
With William Wesley coming basically from there, even though he wasn't technically employed by the program, but he was Kentucky basketball, for the last decade basically, and then assistant coach Kenny Payne as well. Maxey is a divisive player among scouts. Some people think he's not that good. Some people are really high on his talent. There's this perception now, I think, especially after what happened in the bubble, that that these Kentucky guys a lot of times didn't get to show everything they could do at Kentucky because there was so much other talent, and then they blossom in the NBA. I mean, we've seen Devin Booker, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Jamal Murray all played great in the bubble. I think that people kind of overlook the fact that okay, but people thought the same thing with Kevin Knox and James Young and, like Malik Monk. Like it doesn't always work that way,
Right.
So trying to slow people's roll a little bit on that. It's interesting because I think if he doesn't go there, he probably goes more like 15 to 25.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it's a sure thing that he goes there either, because it could be Killian Hayes. And I do think the Knicks are trying to do some trade stuff too. You hear a lot of different things about New York, but it just, there was enough there to make me wonder.
Gotcha. Interesting. All right, let's take one more quick break here. And then again, we got some more questions for John as we wrap this up. What do you got, Trey?
Well, the last time I gave you all my Grammarly mastery score, I was rocking an 81. Not bad.
Not bad.
Probably a fringe lottery pick in a grammar draft, but I got bad news. Been slipping down the draft boards lately. I got my Grammarly premium report the other day and was shocked to find that I had dropped to 77 on the mastery scale. Now they're saying I'm looking more like a late first rounder, but that's what I love about Grammarly Premium. Gives you real-time feedback and insights to help you elevate your writing through tone, word choice, clarity, and more. With Grammarly Premium's guidance, you can communicate clearly and confidently. Guys, I'm a gamer. You put me in a big spot, I'm coming through in the clutch with a nice pull from deep in the vocabulary. But when I saw that 77, I knew there was work to be done. These grammar GMs want to see your commitment to excellence out there, so I hit the gym hard with Grammarly. We're talking one-on-none Grammarly Premium workouts to make my sentences clear, concise, and crisp by cutting out redundant words. I've been doing 2-a-days with Grammarly Premium to expand my vocabulary and replace boring or bland words with more exciting, effective, and memorable ones. Scouts, they're still skeptical I'll be able to use those new words in a game setting, but they like to see the upside potential. With Grammarly Premium's help, I'm trying to put up a 90 in mastery by draft day. That's top 10 pick status any day of the week. If you want to elevate your writing, go to Grammarly.com/NoDunks to get 20% off. That's 20% off Grammarly Premium at GRAMMARLY.com/NoDunks. Sources say it's the best way to help you write like a pro.
Excellent. Well, good luck. I hope you get drafted in the Grammarly draft.
I'm putting it to work. Yeah. I'm out here. I'm typing against the chair. We're seeing what's going to happen. I got a Zoom set up for after this, just like Leigh did. So I'm going to try and school him.
What's your favorite name in this draft class, John? I mean, we've talked about Killian. That's being pretty good. Is there another one? Precious, maybe?
Precious Achua is a good name.
That's a good name.
That's a good name. I was trying to think if there were some deep cuts that had interesting. I hate to say, I mean, Jay Scrub, right? If he ends up not being good, right?
That'd be awesome.
Jay Scrub.
Yeah.
It will be unfortunate if he does stink, but that's a good name. Okay, good. Yeah, there's some pretty good ones. Let's again, we'll wrap this up here. You're a busy man. A few more questions. Cole Anthony was a name we knew. RJ Hampton, of course, was a name we knew. They were, I think, at one time, like top 5 recruits, right?
Yeah.
They have slipped. I mean, they've dropped pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Why do you think their reps like sort of took such a hit?
So RJ Hampton, I'm not sure he slipped that much.
Okay.
He's going to go between, let's say, 8 and 20.
Okay.
So I think I had him 16th to Portland.
That's right.
But he could still end up going in the lottery. I think he still has fans. He wasn't great in New Zealand this year. It was the team itself was like a mess. Like there are stories from there. His shot's a little shaky. He played mostly as like a high volume scorer as a high school player. And I don't think really that's what he can be as an NBA player. So he's got to kind of shape his game in a different way. But he's got tools, and there are people who are interested in him. Anthony, I think, probably slipped more with his play at UNC. I think people see like he's not an impactful defender. He's not a guy who can involve other people that well. He's more just a straight scorer. And at that, one who kind of really struggled to finish in the painted area, even at the college level. Has a strong body. He's a pretty good outside shooter and can create shots. And so I think people see more like a third guard in him now. So I do think he's going to go in the first round, but I think the perception is, if you look at the point guard hierarchy in this draft, right? Like LaMelo Ball is way at the top, obviously. Halliburton, if you think he's a point guard, is next. And then you get into Killian Hayes and Kira Lewis are like the next tier. And then after that, I think Tyrell Terry has kind of jumped Anthony on most people's boards as the next guy. So I think Anthony still gets in the first round at the end of the day, but people were talking about him top 5 in the beginning of the year, and there's no chance of that happening at all.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I didn't mistake in that. That's what it felt like for sure. Maybe that's a part, like, he's Greg Anthony's son, right? There's a link to an NBA. Is he his son? That's right.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not even unusual anymore. Like, there's a lot of these guys now.
Yeah. Which player do you think is most likely to contribute to a championship team because of where they maybe get drafted here to a good team, of course, a team like in contention?
Clearly, the guy the Grizzlies take at 40 will contribute the most to a championship team this year.
That's a fantastic answer. Who do you got? I mean, I know you didn't do the second round when it came to this. Do you have any guesses who the Grizzlies are taking?
No, I don't. The second round is such a crapshoot. All the picks move all around, and it's only 50-50 that they are actually end up picking at 40. Right? There's going to be some trade or another where they move up, move down, move out. It's like electrons in the second round. Like they're just bouncing all over the picks. But in terms of who could contribute to a championship team, sort of like right now, I would say Tyrese Halliburton would definitely be a guy. I think Desmond Bane is a guy late in the draft that teams look at, like, can contribute. I think Sadiq Bey is another guy like that who like shows the ability to defend in switches, but also can make open threes. And like maybe not like crazy high upside with those guys, but those are definitely players that teams that are in closer to a win now mode are looking at and saying like, okay, we can actually get a piece here that is part of our top 9 in a playoff series.
Sure. All right. Those are some names to watch. Tass, Trey, any other questions for John here before we go?
Well, one guy that we don't think will be contributing to a championship team, we touched on him earlier, Aleksej Pokuševski. Like we said, he's very tall. You list him as a, quote, power forward because, like we're saying, this guy he weighs less than Skeets despite being, over 7 feet tall. You have him slotted for the Mavericks, which means that, to me, a little bit, they're ready to wait. They've got Luka, they've got Kristaps, obviously, but they're probably not in the championship mix right away. They're playing a little bit longer of a game. Is this guy going to be the next Giannis? Is he going to be the next Jonathan Bender, the next Nicholas Skitavilli? There's a lot of ranges when you see a very tall perimeter-oriented player who doesn't have a lot of muscle on their frame yet. So what do you feel about this guy?
He's really interesting. Like, he's really skilled. Like, you watch him grab and go with rebounds, pull up from the 3-point line, make one-handed passes off the dribble. Like, there are a lot of 7-footers in the league right now who can't do the stuff he does. Now, conversely, he can't do the stuff that a lot of 7-footers in the league can. Like, he has no lower body strength at all. So he just, like, anytime he has to turn against any kind of muscle or lean or forearm or anything, he's just like, wow, he's just flung backwards. And so it gets thrown off bounds pretty easily. Not sure his motor is always revving super hot in some of these games, but it's so hard to tell because of the level of competition that he's playing against. So I do think he's a tough eval for teams. And I think it's just, you have to go into this accepting that there is a huge range of outcomes and you have to be okay if he's a total bust.
Is he the kind of player in a normal draft year when you're able to get him in for workouts and you're seeing him time and time again? Would he be flying up the draft boards if we're seeing a young guy handling like Giannis out there?
Well, I mean, probably not, because usually you can't get these guys in for workouts that are playing for European teams at the same time and are under contract to them. It's very tough.
Sure.
So I'm not sure the situation would actually be much different. I mean, teams would be trying to sneak into their practices and see him and whatnot. But that's easier with some teams than with others. Like Deni Avdija, every team got to go in and see him practice or whatever. Like, he's there's like no mystery there at all from that perspective. But this guy is definitely a little more of that. And then there's a lot of cat and mouse games going on already. A lot of intrigue about whether he has a promise and he shut down his workouts and he didn't go to the combine. And like, there's definitely some cloak and dagger stuff going on.
Exciting.
Yeah. Not to give you some intel extremely late here, John, but as you said, Deni Avdija, everybody knew about him. I knew about him when he was at a bakery in Marietta. I know you're a local Atlanta guy. I got a text from my in-laws who saw on Facebook that he took a photo with his Israeli crew in Georgia. And I was just wondering, I mean, are they working him out? Are they talking to him? Does he like bread?
Well, I know he actually worked out for Golden State here, I want to say.
Right, yeah. I think his little fulcrum was here, right? I think he set up shop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, which is smart, right? Because it probably means he, got those Delta miles.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're close to the airport. You're there 15 minutes. You stroll right through nowadays. Yeah, you can zip around everywhere.
It's a good call. I just hope he visited the Big Chicken.
Let's hope so. Well, let's end with this, John. Come November 18th, draft night, fill in the blank. The biggest winner from the 2020 NBA draft is blank. You can go player, team. What do you think? Look into your crystal ball.
Biggest winner.
Yeah. Like, what will be the big headline coming out of that November 18th draft night?
Ready for free agency?
Thank God.
Who's ready to sign some players? Yeah, the biggest story might be the contract that gets dumped to give somebody cap room.
Okay, we'll take that. That's a nice way to end it right there. John Hollinger, very excited about the 2020 NBA draft. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these front offices they're done, right? I mean, they've been talking about these same guys over and over and over again.
Since March, yeah. I mean, every one of these front offices is ready to hold the draft on like April 27th, right? Sure. All they did when the league shut down is do all their draft homework. So I think it's going to be almost a relief when this finally gets done for them.
Us as well. And we're not even the biggest draft experts, but guys, go check out John Hollinger's NBA mock draft. It's up on The Athletic. There it is. JD throwing it up for the stream teamers right now, talking about LaMelo, James Wiseman, and all of the top picks. John, thank you so much for joining it. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, Clipper Bros.
You heard it here first. Have a great time. Turn up. Love you guys. Awesome.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
All right.